Good afternoon. Thank you for staying so late. I'm joined by two excellent panelists, Lynette Zhang and JP Cortez. I'm a big fan of both of their work, so this will be interesting. I'd like to get a feel of the room. So who thinks the market's topping right now? Raise your hand. Stock markets in the U.S. So the other half thinks there's more momentum, yes? Okay, how do you feel about precious metals, gold? $2,600, is this the top? Raise your hand if you think this is the top. I guess everyone's bullish. Lynette's shaking her head. So we're going to find out why she's shaking her head. Okay. Last question, gold mining stocks. How bullish do you feel? Are we going to get a bull market soon? Another bull market soon? Wow. So you guys like gold, but you don't like gold mining stocks. Now that's interesting. Okay. Lynette, let's start with you. You've done a lot of work analyzing global liquidity trends, macroeconomic trends. The theme of our conversation today is inflation. There's lots to talk about with inflation. The Fed believes inflation is a little bit sticky. But even before that, let's back up. You are very familiar with gold. Both of you are. Precious metals, sound money. Gold is often described as a hedge against. People have different reasons for why they need a hedge using gold. Why are you using gold? What is the number one thing that investors should be hedging against in 2025?
Well, the number one thing that I'm hedging against is a currency reset. That's, to put it quickly.
Well, no, we've got time. Tell us about this currency reset, Lynette.
Well, every currency, everything has a life cycle. It doesn't matter what it is. And we are at the end of this currency's life cycle and this experiment with inflation, because inflation was baked into the system right from the beginning, right from 1913. And it was a way to transfer wealth without anybody arguing about it or protecting themselves from it. So now we are going into a new system, and I'd like to have a say in that system, because what they have intended for us is full surveillance and full control, and that's not okay with me.
Okay, we're going to come back to that. But JP, same question to you. Why should investors hold gold in 2025?
I think that there are a lot of good answers to that question generally. Debt default, market volatility, the reduction of counterparty risk. But I think as it pertains to today, inflation. The answer is inflation, which is the theme of the conversation here. In the short term, I see inflation going up. I think tariffs will be inflationary, at least price inflation. I think that the idea that the incoming administration will be disciplined and will shrink the government and will reduce the deficit is a dream. I don't think there's any evidence that this administration in its previous term or generally politicians want to do this. I think there's no political will to do this. As a question of spending, the biggest things that America is facing right now is entitlement spending and military spending. Without looking at those two things, you cannot have a serious conversation in the United States about spending, about the debt problem, and ultimately about inflation. And there is no political will to touch either of these two things. No one's going to cut Social Security. Department of Defense spending is not going to go down, regardless of what Doge or Vivek or Elon says. So I think so important here is to remain disciplined in the investment thesis that has been the reason we've been doing this all along. The government isn't going to get smaller. It's not going to start spending less. And sound money allows you to opt out of this system, of theft. Like Lynette said, there are really only three options that a government has to fund itself. It can tax its people, which it doesn't like to do, obviously. It can print, which is where we are now, and it's insidious because people don't realize that they're being taxed. They don't realize that their wealth is being zapped away. And so it's underlying and it's sneakier than it's ever been because these machinations, this financial alchemy is becoming more sophisticated. Quantitative easing, it doesn't end here. It gets more complex, and they're doing everything they can to continue this inflationary cycle. I think gold and silver are ultimately the escape from that, and as a question of prices, that makes me really bullish on the metals.
Lynette, do you have a response to that before I move on to the next question?
Well, what JP says is absolutely accurate, but understand that there are so many different ways that they tax you without you realizing it. Inflation is one way. Royalties are another way. I mean, so yeah, they're going to attack sound money, and that's why, one of the reasons why it makes so critical for you to hold it. Because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. It is a counterparty risk because it is simply a contract.
Okay, so JP said that he said inflation's going up. You're saying kind of the same thing with currency debasement. That's two sides of the same coin. What's your thesis for why inflation is not going away anytime soon?
I don't even know how to answer it. The central banks, the government spending. We are so far gone in the system that there just aren't any other options. They have to hyperinflate all the debt away so they can restart into a new system. So I don't think it's just inflation. I think that we're facing hyperinflation because it's only not hyperinflating right at this moment because of public confidence. And that is going away. That is absolutely, it's been declining forever. And I think there's some hopium out there, but absolutely, once that confidence is gone, then the hyperinflation becomes apparent to everybody.
And I'd like to add to that that when the eulogy of the United States dollar is written, the tombstone should not say that it was a foreign dictator that killed the US dollar. It should not say that it was the CEO of your local grocery store that caused inflation and killed the dollar. All of this has been self-inflicted. The public loss of confidence in the United States dollar is the fault of no one but the United States itself, that have perverted the global reserve currency and used it to fight endless wars, to grow a bureaucracy that ultimately harms the people living under it. So none of this was an accident, and none of this is like, oh, whoops, we did this, I didn't mean to do this. This has been their goal. We've known that since 1913, the point is to devalue the money. It's literally in their mission statement. They want to do it by a stated 2% a year. That's what it's what they're intending to do. So there is no accident to this. There is no, wow, I can't believe that this is what's happening. I can't believe we're faced with potentially a hyperinflationary environment or outlook. This is how it was supposed to go, and obviously sound money is one of the so few escapes to this system that is actively harming all of us. You know, in the United States at least, for a long time, home ownership was the asset that people used to either preserve their wealth or build their wealth. But at least in the States and in Canada here too, that door has been shut on so many people. So what are their options? Tangible assets, gold and silver. This is one of the few remaining lifeboats that people have to protect themselves from this inflation.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of real estate, right, it's not the value of that house going up. When I bought my first house, that would have been 1977, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, about 1,800 square feet. So it was a nice little starter house. And I paid $59,000 for that house. Today, that same house is probably closer to $450,000, $500,000. Is it the house that went up in value or the currency that went down? And that 2% inflation is the rate at which you don't notice it, so you do not change your behavior. That is what they're calling price stability. Not that that house remains the same price and is stable, but that you don't make any changes.
How Orwellian, right? The saying price stability. If I were shrinking by 2 inches every year and I said my height were stable, everyone would think I was crazy. This is an Orwellian use of language to keep you from noticing that your dollar is being intentionally devalued.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're both on the same page in terms of inflation and currency debasement. So
Yes.
Just to add a little spice to the debate, let me just play devil's advocate because there's nobody here to debate you. So I might as well. All right. The counter argument to hyperinflation is, first of all, some academics define hyperinflation as 50% inflation year, month over month. You know, we can debate that. But right now we're at 2.9 headline, 3.2 core CPI. That's a big jump away from 3% to 50%. Furthermore, as you'll know, we came down from 9.1% already. So the trend trajectory of inflation has been down over the last 2 years, kind of stabilizing around current levels. There needs to be a catalyst before we get to, double-digit inflation, and we're not seeing that yet. How would you respond to that?
Well, there's this bridge in Brooklyn that
Yeah.
I would like to sell you if you actually believe those headline numbers are any of the inflation numbers.
Okay.
Because all they do is change the formulas. They don't actually change behavior. And, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen just could not understand why the public doesn't get that this inflation is under control. It's not under control. It's really more toward that 10%. And it could even be higher than that, but that's according to John Williams at Shadow Stats,
Yeah.
who's been tracking it since the early 80s. And probably also the people that go to the grocery store on a regular basis. So I say that number is untrue. And I also say that it's all about that confidence level. And when people lose that confidence, that's when we can get to that 50% very, very quickly. We can do it overnight. And we might be doing it overnight. We've done it close to it.
Yes. We're also assuming that the consumer needs to spend money because the Bank of Japan in the early 90s printed a lot of money. They had deflation because the Japanese savings rate was so high, right? It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the United States, as you know, the savings rate is, 4%, maybe even lower. So if people keep spending money, that's what's going to cause inflation, right? But if people start saving money like the Japanese, it doesn't matter how much the central bank prints, right? Maybe.
Well, that's true, except that there's only one way to fight inflation, and that's with deflation, and only one way to fight deflation, and that's with inflation. And it's that fine line that the central bankers have been trying to walk so that you don't realize what's happening. But quite honestly, I don't really care if it's inflation or deflation. Either way, if you're holding fiat or intangible assets, you're losing.
So give us some ideas on how to hedge against either, inflation or deflation.
Okay. Well, I think that it is critically important that everybody become as independent and self-sufficient as possible. And I think we can all remember what happened during COVID in 2020, and the grocery store shelves went barren. And if you didn't have a garden, then how are you going to eat? It created a lot of problems. And those problems have not actually been fixed. So I developed from then my mantra, well, actually, that's from 2008 when the system died. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. That's how you fight inflation.
JP?
As far as fighting inflation and what individuals can and should be doing right now, obviously we know gold and silver are the keys to escaping inflation, are the keys to price stability and saving of your wealth. One of the things that I would suggest that I see a lot, so I run a public policy group and go state to state passing these laws, but one of the funder, the backer of this project is an online dealer called Money Metals Exchange. And one of the things that they harp on that is so important to them and that I've seen it and now lived it myself is the importance of becoming a sophisticated precious metals investor, right? We're talking about buying gold and silver here, but that can span to mean a bunch of different things. And so just on a very basic level, to the extent that we're talking about like individual purchases of metal, make sure that when you're buying precious metal, you're buying it as close to the spot price as possible. Collectible coins, rare coins. There are a lot of people in this industry that will encourage you to invest your metals in these products, and I would encourage you to think twice. So when you're buying, make sure that you are buying as close to spot as possible, and when you're buying, make sure that you're avoiding taxation as much as possible. With the legislation, the projects that we've done, we've eliminated sales tax, for example, in 45 of the 50 United States. So if you're paying sales tax on precious metals in the United States, you're making a huge mistake, and it's very easy to get around that. There are ways, capital gains too. There are ways to be strategic about precious metals. It's not like, you buy a rare coin and then 10 years from now you're going to be a trillionaire enough to be swimming through Uncle Scrooge's pool of gold. That's not actually how it works. So I encourage everyone to become as sophisticated and educated as a precious metals investor to the extent that you're using that as a strategy to escape inflation as possible.
So now we can have an interesting conversation. Because I definitely do feel very strongly about rare coins or pre-33 coins, this is not a rare coin. This is just a raw ounce of gold, right? However, it was minted in 1885. And what I know is that desperate governments do desperate things. So based upon the studies that I've done on currency life cycle since 1987, I developed a sound money strategy that is built in layers. Because can anybody here absolutely 100% guarantee that the government won't come in and confiscate the gold again? When, in the US it's been confiscated 3 times, and we're looking at around the world confiscations. They can call it different names, but it's still confiscation. So I had my Uncle Al, and this was my personal experience, and did it impact me? Heck yes, it impacted me. 1964, my parents and I go to his house, and he says, come on, I want to show you something. And we go into his back bedroom, and he had 2 tall floor safes. And he opened those doors, and he told my parents and I that Aunt Bertie would be well taken care of for the rest of her life because of what's in these 2 safes if anything should happen to him. So I turned around and looked. I was 10 years old. I didn't really understand what I was seeing, but I can tell you, there was not room for even 1 more of these. In 1964, it was illegal to hold more than 5 ounces of gold in any other way. Now, if you were in the gold business, you could, but it was overseen. So Treasury Secretary Wooden went ahead and wrote that little caveat in there so that he and his friends could continue to hold and accumulate gold when the public thought that they couldn't. The reality is they could. So I'm very, very keen on that, but there's all different kinds of gold, and it needs to be based on and silver as well. It needs to be based on what it is that you are trying to accomplish. It is not one size fits all. It is what are you trying to do? Because there is enough history to look back on the way that the prices do move in terms of fiat that would determine what you should do.
Okay, excellent. I want to follow up on JP for just a minute, please. On your work, you advocate for the use of gold and silver as money. Can we start to see one day gold and silver become legal tender once more in the United States?
I hope so. That's for you. But yeah, I mean, we're both working on it. But yes.
Yes.
I think we already are. Just in 2024, there were 65 bills that were introduced across 28 of the United States. You're telling me 55, 60% of the entire country is considering legislation that makes it easier for people to buy and sell gold, removing sales tax on the metals, removing capital gains tax on the metals. And that, to me, is the largest reason that gold and silver are not used as money today. Of course, you have Gresham's Law, which is important. But regulatorily, the reason that people can't use gold and silver as money today is because there's too much friction on either side of the transaction. When you buy precious metals, in some cases, you're going to get hit with a sales tax. When you sell those precious metals, you're going to get hit with a state capital gains tax and a federal capital gains tax. In some cases, you're triple taxation for using gold and silver, so for spending it, for acquiring it and then spending it. So as money, there's too much friction. It doesn't work. So the answer has to be to reduce some of this friction, to remove the disincentives and the briar standing in the way of people actually using gold and silver as money. And we've already seen that. Just by my count, as of this morning, in 2025, the legislative season in the United States is just now getting started. We're already up to 41 pieces of legislation across 19 states. More are expected to introduce this stuff. So it's on an individual level, of course, the goal is to make it easier for people to transact in and to use and to save and invest in precious metals. But it's not just individual either. Right? We're hearing so much talk recently about de-dollarization and, Russia's de-dollarizing and American adversaries are de-dollarizing. But it's not just American adversaries. It's not just countries with an adversarial relationship to the United States. The United States themselves, individual states are de-dollarizing. They're passing legislation to invest state funds in physical gold and silver held within the state. So it's not just enemies that have, a potential conflict or potential war likelihood with the United States. Everywhere from the individual to the corporate level, where companies are starting to hold precious metals on their balance sheet, to states that are starting to hold precious metals on their balance sheet, to obviously the BRICS countries and different international groups. Gold and silver, this revival is happening, whether we want it to or not. But to continue to remove the friction standing in the way is ultimately what's going to get there. Because, like I mentioned, Gresham's law is important, and maybe people won't want to spend their gold if they're able to, but there are people that do want to spend their gold. There are people that do want transactional gold, be it digitized, or be it in the form of gold backs, or be it in the form of fractional metals like we've never seen before. And we're seeing more and more innovation in this space to allow for people to transact peer-to-peer.
We're just about out of time, but I'd like to let Lynette respond to that and finish, please. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Physical is one way to buy gold. How would you compare physical bullion, like you have on your chair here, versus paper, ETFs, fractional gold, digital, so on and so forth? What's your take?
Well, first of all, fractional just means less than 1 ounce. And yes, we have to stay current with the time, so I'm in agreement, but an ETF is not actually buying gold. You're buying shares of a trust in a diminishing asset because they're selling off on a daily basis parts of their gold holdings, if it's a gold ETF or silver. So, you have to make sure that even in this digital world that we're going into, that it is convertible, period, end of discussion. Because if you cannot take possession of it, then how do you know it's real? You don't. So I'm in agreement with them. And also, I've realized, and I hope everybody here realizes, that they need to get involved in encouraging your states to hold gold and silver, to legalize that and remove that taxation. Because I was really excited when I saw President Biden change the status of marijuana. Why? Because the states had adopted it. And so if we can get the states to adopt gold and silver as legal tender again, that can put pressure on the federal government.
100% agree.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate both of you. Before we go, where can we follow you, guys?
Well, you can follow me at LynetteZhang.com on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all sorts of social media. And yes, thanks to Jacqueline, we too execute the strategy and do sell the physical gold and silver, but we also are getting more and more involved in the legislation, like JP is.
JP?
You can find us at, the name of the organization is the Sound Money Defense League. You can find us at soundmoneydefense.org. You can find me on Twitter, jpcortez27. My email and my phone number are on the website, and I'll be around for the rest of the conference, and I have cards and such. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.